A bleeding bobcat pushed through our clinic door at midnight. But she wasn't running from the storm. She was running towards something we hadn't seen yet. The night had that particular kind of quiet that only comes during a blizzard. Wind battering the windows, the world reduced to what our fluorescent lights could reach. I was 3 hours into a shift that should have ended at 9, filling out discharge paperwork for a Labrador who'd eaten half a jump rope. My partner Casey was restocking exam room 2. The overnight kennel tech had already started her rounds in the back. The heater kicked on with its familiar rattle. Just another February night at Ridgeline Veterinary. Then I heard it. Not the wind, not the building settling, the weighted front door, the one that requires a solid push to open, scraping against the tile. I looked up expecting a late emergency. Maybe someone's dog was hit by a plow. Instead, every rational thought I had went silent. A bobcat stood in my doorway. Small, soaked, one front paw held at an angle that made my chest tighten. Blood matted the fur along her shoulder, dark and fresh against the snow melting beneath her. She should have been hissing, backing away, doing anything except what she was doing. She was staring directly at me, waiting. "Casey, don't turn around fast, but we have a situation." The bobcat didn't flinch at my voice. Her ears didn't flatten. She just stood there, sides heaving, eyes locked on mine with an intensity that felt less like fear and more like purpose. That's when I noticed her head kept turning, not toward us, toward the storm behind her, like she was checking on something or someone. Before we find out why Luna walked away 3 years ago and why she came back bleeding, I need your help with something wild. We're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers. And honestly, if a 30-pound bobcat can drag a grown human out of a frozen ravine, you can definitely hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and if you think your pet would save you or just judge you from the couch. Let's see if we can get more subscribers than Luna has reasons to trust humans. Challenge accepted? What happened next would pull me into the worst storm of the decade and show me that the wildest things aren't always the ones we fear most. But to understand why I followed her into that blizzard, you need to know about the winter Luna first came to us, broken and half frozen, in a cardboard box marked Free Kittens.
3 years earlier, on a morning that felt like any other, someone left that box on our doorstep before dawn. No note, no explanation, just 4 frost-dusted cardboard flaps and the sound of something moving weakly inside. I almost stepped over it on my way to unlock the clinic. Casey found me crouched in the parking lot, the box open, my hands hovering over something I couldn't quite process. What I'd expected, abandoned kittens, maybe a litter of puppies, wasn't what I got. A bobcat kitten, maybe 8 weeks, hypothermic, barely breathing. "That's not a house cat," Casey said, stating the obvious in that flat tone she uses when her brain is already 3 steps ahead, calculating survival odds. "No," I agreed, "it's not." Her fur was dull, matted with something that might have been oil or mud or both. One eye was swollen shut. The other tracked us with that unfocused gaze of something too sick to be afraid. Her ribs pressed against paper-thin skin. When I lifted her, so carefully, expecting her to throsh, she just went limp in my hands. Warm, that was my only thought. Get her warm. Inside, we cleared exam room 1. Casey grabbed the heated recovery bed we kept for post-surgical patients, while I wrapped the kitten in towels straight from the warmer. Her temperature read 94 degrees. Her heart rate was barely detectable. "We need to call wildlife services," Casey said, already reaching for the phone. "They won't get here for hours. Look at her." Casey looked. We both knew what hours meant. The kitten's breathing had gone shallow, that terrible kind of quiet that comes right before the body gives up. Her one good eye had closed. I could feel her heartbeat against my palm, faint and irregular like a moth trapped behind glass. "Okay," Casey said, setting the phone down. "What do you need?" What followed was 3 hours of the most delicate work I'd ever done. IV catheter in a vein smaller than a strand of spaghetti, warmed fluids at a rate slow enough not to shock her system, antibiotics for the infection I could smell in her wounds. Every few minutes I checked her temperature, watching the numbers climb with painful slowness. 95 degrees, 96, 97. At 98, she opened her eyes. Not in panic, not in aggression. She just looked at me with that same steady gaze I'd see again 3 years later, standing in a pool of melting snow. "Hey there," I whispered. "Stay with me." Her tiny chest expanded. Once, twice. A sound came from her throat. Not a hiss, not a growl. Something softer. Something that almost sounded like a question. By the time Wildlife Services arrived that afternoon, she was stable, warm, fed, resting in the heated bed with the kind of stillness that spoke of deep exhaustion, not surrender. The officer who came was Martinez. He took one look at her and shook his head. "You saved her life, but you know we can't release her back to the wild now, not after this much human contact at this age." "What happened to her?" Casey asked. "Sanctuary, if we can find one with space. Education animals, maybe. She'll never be wild again." I looked down at the kitten, now sleeping with her swollen eye finally starting to open. Something in my chest tightened. "What if she stayed here?" The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. "Temporarily, until you find placement." Martinez studied me for a long moment. "Temporarily," he repeated. "You'd need permits, proper enclosure, someone who knows what they're doing." "I know what I'm doing," I said, and at that moment I believed it. Temporarily became a week became a month. The permits came through. We converted the old storage room into something that wasn't quite wild and wasn't quite domestic. Climbing structures Casey built from branches and rope, a den box with shredded paper, skylights so she could see the moon. She grew. The infection healed. Her eyes opened fully, revealing gold-flecked amber that seemed to notice everything. She learned her name, Luna, though I suspected she'd chosen to respond rather than been taught to obey. She learned the sound of my footsteps versus Casey's. She learned that the metal food bowl meant breakfast. She learned that the clinic's rhythms, the morning unlocking, the afternoon rush, the evening quiet, were safe patterns she could trust. But she never forgot what she was. I'd catch her sometimes at the window, body gone still, watching the tree line beyond the parking lot with an intensity that made my throat tight. On those days, she wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, just watched and waited and remembered something I could never give her back. The sanctuary called after 6 months. They had space. Martinez said it was time. I packed her things, her favorite blanket, the toy mouse she'd shredded and somehow still carried around, a bag of the specialized food she'd grown used to. Casey built a proper transport carrier, reinforced and lined with soft bedding. The night before she was supposed to leave, I sat with her in her room after closing. She climbed into my lap, something she rarely did anymore, and rested her head against my chest. "You're going to be okay," I told her. "Better than okay. You'll have space, trees, maybe even other bobcats." Her purr rumbled against my ribs. Not the purr of a house cat, something deeper, something wild trying very hard to be gentle. She never made it to the sanctuary. The morning they were supposed to pick her up, her enclosure door was open. Not broken, not damaged, just open. The lock was still engaged, but the door itself pushed outward as if something small and determined had figured out how to lift while pulling. We searched for 3 days, called her name until our voices went hoarse, set out her favorite foods, left her blanket by the clinic entrance. Nothing. Martinez said it happened sometimes, he explained. They remember, even the ones raised by humans. Something calls them back. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel betrayed. Instead, I just felt hollow, staring at the empty enclosure and wondering if I'd given her enough, taught her enough, prepared her for a world that hadn't prepared itself for her. Casey found me there the third night, sitting on the floor beside Luna's den box. "She made her choice," Casey said quietly. "That's all we can ask for, that she got to choose." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You gave her that," Casey added. "The choice. That's something." For 3 years, I believed that, believed she was out there somewhere, living the life she was supposed to have lived. I'd glimpse movement in the trees sometimes during my commute and let myself imagine. I'd hear about bobcat sightings in the area and wonder. I never expected to see her again. I certainly never expected her to come back. But that night, standing in the clinic doorway with blood on her fur and purpose in her eyes, Luna had come home, and she'd brought something with her that I couldn't see yet, something waiting in the storm, something that needed us in ways I wouldn't understand until it was almost too late. The question wasn't why she'd left, it was why she'd returned, and the answer to that question was currently freezing to death 2 miles into the woods, in a ravine I didn't know existed, waiting for someone who would never give up to find them, even if that someone had 4 legs and weighed 30 pounds soaking wet, even if that someone should have been impossible.
"Casey, I need the trauma kit. Now." My partner was already moving before I finished the sentence, muscle memory taking over. Luna hadn't moved from the doorway. Snow pooled beneath her, pink-tinged where the blood mixed with meltwater. I approached slowly, hands visible, voice low. "Hey, Luna. It's okay. You remember me?" Her ear flicked. Recognition, maybe, or just acknowledging sound. "I'm going to help you," I said, lowering myself to her level. "That's what you came here for, right?" But even as I said it, something felt wrong. Her posture wasn't right for an animal seeking refuge. She wasn't cowering, wasn't trying to make herself small or defensive. She was standing guard. Casey returned with the kit, setting it beside me with careful precision. "Martinez is 20 minutes out. I told him we have her contained." "She's not contained," I said. "She walked in." Semantics. Maybe, but semantics mattered when you were dealing with something that had chosen to be here. I opened the kit slowly, letting Luna see each movement: gauze, saline, the preloaded sedative syringe I hoped I wouldn't need. Her eyes tracked everything, but kept returning to the door behind her, to the storm that showed no signs of easing. "I'm going to touch you now," I said, reaching forward. She let me. The shoulder wound was deep but clean, not a bite, not a claw mark. Something sharp and man-made had grazed her. The paw she'd been favoring showed swelling, but no break, just the deep bruising of something struck hard or twisted wrong. These were traveling injuries, running for miles injuries, not fleeing from danger injuries. "Casey, look at her pads." My partner knelt beside me, examining Luna's feet with gentle fingers. "Worn raw. She's been on the move for hours, maybe longer. In this storm? Apparently." I cleaned the shoulder wound, half expecting Luna to pull away or snap. She did neither, just stood there trembling from cold or exhaustion, or both, letting me work while her gaze stayed fixed on something outside our understanding. That's when I saw it. Caught in the thick fur of her ruff, nearly invisible against the matted coat, a scrap of fabric. Dark blue, torn, fresh. I worked it free carefully, holding it to the light. "That's Gore-Tex," Casey said immediately. "Hiking jacket, maybe? Good quality." We looked at each other. Then we looked at Luna. She'd turned her head again, staring at the door with that same unwavering intensity. A low sound came from her throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a call. Something urgent. "Hayes, what if Luna didn't come here because she's hurt?
The thought had already been forming, cold and terrible, in the back of my mind. We need to call search and rescue. And tell them what? That a bobcat brought us a piece of someone's jacket? Yes. Then we'll be insane together. But before I could reach for my phone, Luna moved. She tried to stand on all fours, putting weight on the injured paw. Her legs buckled immediately. She went down hard, a sharp yip of pain breaking through her stoic silence. I was beside her in an instant, hands steadying her shoulder. Easy. You need to rest. You're safe now. Her eyes met mine, and I understood with sudden and complete clarity that safety wasn't what she'd come for. She struggled again, trying to rise, her whole body shaking with the effort. When I tried to ease her back down, she resisted, not with aggression, but with something that looked dangerously close to desperation. She wants to leave, Casey said. She wants to go back out there. She can barely walk. I don't think she cares. Luna's head swung toward the door again, her ears pricked forward, despite the exhaustion, despite the pain, despite every logical reason to rest. She was listening to something, or someone. I looked down at the scrap of Gore-Tex in my hand, then at the blood still seeping slowly from Luna's shoulder, then at the storm raging beyond our safe, warm walls. If Luna didn't come here to be saved, then who did she come for? I said, quietly, the words tasting like a truth I wasn't ready for. Casey's phone buzzed, Martinez asking for an ETA, asking if we had the animal secured, asking all the right questions that suddenly felt completely wrong. Luna's eyes hadn't left the darkness beyond the door, and somewhere out there, in the worst blizzard we'd seen in a decade, someone was wearing a torn jacket and running out of time. Luna just saved their lives, and she can't even see straight. Meanwhile, 47 of you are watching this without subscribing. 47! That's more people than Luna's vet bills. Here's the deal. Smash that like button if you think animals are better navigators than your phone's GPS, and subscribe if you've ever trusted something that made absolutely no logical sense. Also, where are you watching from? Because I need to know which country has the most people who believe a bobcat can outsmart a blizzard. We're racing to 1K, and Luna's literally dying out here. Don't let her down.
I made the call before I could talk myself out of it. Martinez, we have a situation that's bigger than a wounded bobcat. Casey was already pulling emergency gear from the supply closet. Headlamps, thermal blankets, the satellite GPS we kept for house calls in the backcountry. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but I caught the way her jaw tightened when she zipped her coat. We both knew what we were about to do was insane. Luna was on her feet again, swaying but determined. The moment I opened the door, she pushed past me into the storm without hesitation. "Luna, wait!" But she was already moving, limping heavily but with clear direction. Not random, not wandering, following something. The cold hit like a wall. Wind tore at my jacket, driving snow horizontally into my face. Visibility dropped to maybe 15 feet. Casey grabbed my arm, her grip tight even through our gloves. "Stay close," she shouted over the wind. "If we lose sight of her—" "I won't." Luna's dark shape was barely visible ahead, a moving shadow against the white. She picked her way through the drifts with surprising certainty, choosing paths that looked impossible until we followed, narrow gaps between snowbanks, windbreaks behind equipment sheds, places where the storm's fury eased just enough to breathe. She knew this landscape. I had traveled there recently, was retracing steps despite the pain. My headlamp beam caught her every few seconds as she paused, waiting for us to catch up. Her sides heaved with effort. Blood still seeped from her shoulder, leaving dark spots in the snow that disappeared almost instantly under fresh powder. "Casey, she's going to collapse," I said. "I know. And when she does, we're a mile from the clinic in zero visibility." "I know." But we kept walking. 20 minutes in, my fingers had gone numb despite the gloves. Ice caked my eyelashes.
The GPS showed we were heading northeast, toward the state forest boundary, where the trail got rough and the trails stopped pretending to be maintained. Luna stopped at a fallen tree, its trunk forming a natural bridge over what looked like a drainage ditch. She turned back, looking at us directly, waiting. "You want us to cross that?" I said. She didn't move. Casey tested the log with her boot. It's solid, buried in ice. We crossed. Luna continued. The path, if you could call it that, grew steeper, harder. My calves burned. My lungs ached from breathing frozen air. Casey stumbled twice, catching herself on trees whose branches clawed at our coats. And still, Luna moved forward, choosing each step with impossible precision for an animal who should have been unconscious by now. "How does she know where she's going?" Casey asked, voice raw from shouting over the wind. I didn't have an answer. Then, without warning, Luna stopped. Not to rest, not to wait for us. She'd gone completely still, head lowered, body tense. A sound came from deep in her chest. Low, sustained, dangerous. A warning. I swept my headlamp across the area ahead. Snow, trees, shadows that moved when the wind hit them. Nothing obvious. Nothing. Casey grabbed my shoulder, pointing left. The ground ahead wasn't ground at all. It was a snow-covered ledge, the edge invisible until you were close enough to see where the tree shadows stopped and empty space began. A ravine. Luna had stopped us 10 feet from an edge we would have walked straight over in the whiteout. My heart hammered against my ribs. Casey's breathing came in sharp, visible bursts. Luna limped to the ravine's edge, peering into darkness our lights couldn't penetrate. That sound came again from her throat, not a warning this time, a call. And from somewhere in the black depth below, impossible and faint beneath the storm's roar, came something that made my blood go cold. A voice. Humans. Weak. Calling back.
"Hello?" I shouted into the ravine. "Can you hear me?" The wind swallowed my voice. Casey was already on her phone, but the signal bars flickered and died. Too remote. Too much storm interference. "We need to get down there," I said. "It's a 30-foot drop, maybe more. We can't see the bottom." Luna made that sound again, that call, and the voice answered, weaker this time, barely audible, still alive. I swept my headlamp along the ravine's edge, searching for a way down. The beam caught something 10 feet to our left, disturbed snow in a pattern that didn't match the storm's natural drift, branches broken at odd angles, a scrape mark on a tree trunk. "Someone fell," Casey said, "recently, or climbed down after someone else." We followed the trail Luna had already found, moving parallel to the edge. She stayed ahead despite the limp, despite the exhaustion, choosing each step with that same impossible certainty, checking back every few feet to make sure we followed. The smallest creature here, the most injured, leading us through terrain that should have killed her. The ravine curved, and suddenly the ground shifted beneath the snow. Loose rocks, unstable footing hidden under white. Luna veered right, away from what looked like the clearest path. I started to follow the easier route. Casey grabbed my arm. "Wait." She knelt where Luna had turned away, brushing snow aside with her gloved hand. The ground gave way beneath her touch, just a thin crust of ice over empty space. A sinkhole, snow-covered, invisible. "She knew," Casey whispered. Luna was already moving again, leading us on the longer path, the harder path, the path that kept us alive, past the unstable ground, around a section where the ravine's edge had undercut, through a gap between boulders that sheltered us briefly from the wind. She'd done this before, in reverse, following someone out, or trying to. The path widened into a small clearing. Luna stopped at the clearing's far edge and lay down, not from exhaustion, with purpose. She curled herself against the ravine's lip, her body forming a small windbreak, and looked down into the darkness below. Then she looked back at us. "Here." I dropped to my stomach beside her,
headlamp pointing down. The beam barely penetrated the snow and shadow, but it was enough. 20 feet below, wedged against a rock outcropping, partially covered by a fallen branch in blown snow, was a person. Young, male, wearing the torn blue jacket we'd found fabric from. His eyes were closed. His skin was gray in the harsh LED light. He wasn't moving. "Oh God," Casey breathed beside me. "How long has he been down there?" Luna's answer was a soft sound. Not quite a whimper, not quite a cry. She pressed closer to the edge, as close as she could get without falling, her eyes locked on the motionless figure below. I watched her for a long moment, saw the way she positioned herself between the wind and the ravine, saw the blood still seeping from her shoulder, the tremor in her exhausted muscles, the way she refused to rest even now. "She's been here before," I said quietly. "She found him, stayed with him, then left to get help." "Hayes, that's impossible. She's an animal. Look at her." Casey looked. We both did. Luna had shifted position, moving as close to the edge as physics would allow. Her ears were forward, focused entirely on the hiker below, and from her throat came a sound I'd never heard from her before. Low, rhythmic, almost like a purr but deeper, sadder. The sound of someone keeping vigil. "How far did you walk?" I whispered to her. "How many times did you fall? How did you even know where to bring us?" She didn't answer, just kept making that sound, kept watching, kept waiting for us to do what she couldn't, reach down into that darkness and pull someone back. I yanked my radio from my belt, praying for any signal. Static. Then faintly, Martinez's voice. "Position? Copy?" "Martinez, we found him. Hiker in a ravine, state forest northeast boundary. Hypothermic, unresponsive. We need technical rescue, medevac if you can get one in this storm." "Say again? You found?" "Just send everyone, now." The radio crackled and died. Casey was already unpacking rope from her emergency kit, tying off to the nearest solid tree. "I'm going down." "You're insane." "Do you have a better idea?" I didn't. She rappelled over the edge, headlamp beam swinging wildly as the wind caught her. I fed rope through frozen fingers, watching her descent, watching Luna's descent. 3 minutes that felt like hours. Then Casey's voice from below. "He's alive, barely, but he's breathing. I need the thermal blankets. Hayes, throw them down." I did, wrapped in a stuff sack tied to a spare line. It took 2 tries in the wind. Luna hadn't moved. Her eyes tracked every motion, every sound from below. That rhythmic call continued, steady as a heartbeat. "I brought them. I kept my promise. Hold on." Casey's light reappeared at the ravine's edge. "We can't move him, too risky, but I've got him wrapped and sheltered. Where's that medevac?" As in an answer, a sound cut through the storm, distinct, growing closer. Helicopter rotors. Luna's ears pricked. She lifted her head slightly, that sound from her throat finally going quiet. In the headlamp's glow, I saw her eye, the one that had been swollen shut 3 years ago, that had opened to look at me with trust when nothing in her life had earned that trust. It is closing now, exhaustion winning. "Stay awake," I told her, hand on her blood-matted fur. "Just a little longer. You did it. He's going to make it because of you." But even as the helicopter's searchlight cut through the snow, even as rescue voices called out coordinates, even as the impossible became simply improbable, one question remained, the one that would haunt me long after the storm ended. When exactly did Luna decide that a human life was worth dying for?
The helicopter couldn't land. Too much wind, too little clearance. They lowered a basket instead, spinning wildly on its cable as paramedics fought their way down the ravine's face. Casey stayed below with the hiker, keeping him sheltered while the rescue team worked. I stayed above with Luna, one hand on her side, feeling her heartbeat. Too fast, too shallow, as she watched the organized chaos unfold beneath us. "He's got a pulse," one of the paramedics shouted up. "Weak, but steady. The core temp is 89. We need to move fast." They secured him in the basket with practiced efficiency. Straps, thermal wraps, IV lines started despite frozen veins and impossible conditions. The helicopter winch groaned as it took the weight. Luna tried to stand. "No," I said, gentle but firm. "You're done. You did everything." She fought me anyway, getting her front legs under her, then her back, swaying, shaking, but standing. The basket rose past us, the hiker's pale face visible for just a moment in the searchlight's glare. 23, maybe 24. Someone's son, someone's friend, someone who would have died alone in the dark if not for a wounded animal who refused to give up. Luna watched until the basket disappeared into the helicopter's belly. Then, and only then, did she let herself collapse. I caught her before she hit the ground, cradling 30 pounds of exhausted wild against my chest. Her fur was wet with melted snow and blood. Her breathing came in ragged pulls. But when I looked down, her eyes were open, clear, present. I did it. I kept the promise. "Yeah," I whispered. "You did." Casey climbed back up, snow-covered and shaking. "Paramedic says another hour and he wouldn't have made it. Core temp was dropping, organs starting to shut down." She looked at Luna. How long was she down there with him? Hours, maybe longer. Keeping him warm? Trying to. The helicopter lifted away, searchlight sweeping across the tree line, one last time before disappearing into the thinning storm. Dawn was coming, gray light bleeding through the clouds, turning the world from black to white. Martinez arrived with the ground crew 15 minutes later, bringing a proper animal stretcher and enough medical supplies to stabilize Luna properly. The shoulder wound needed sutures. The paw needed wrapping. She needed fluids, antibiotics, and rest. She accepted it all with that same quiet patience she shown 3 years ago, letting us work, trusting despite every wild instinct that should have told her to run. "What happens to her now?" Martinez asked as we loaded her into his truck. "She comes home," I said, "for as long as she wants to stay." We drove back in silence, through roads being cleared by early plows, past the clinic where this had started just 6 hours ago. 6 hours felt like a lifetime. Casey made coffee while I settled Luna in her old room, the one we'd never had the heart to repurpose. The climbing structures were dusty. The den box was filled with old files. But the space was still there, waiting, as if some part of us had always known. I lined the den with fresh blankets, set out water, left the door cracked so she could see out, see us moving around, know she wasn't locked in. She drank a little, closed her eyes, slept the way the truly exhausted sleep, deep and dreamless and safe. Martinez called at noon. Hiker's stable. They're warming him slowly at County General. Docs say it's a miracle he made it. It wasn't a miracle. No, Martinez agreed quietly. It wasn't. Did he say what happened? Lost the trail yesterday afternoon, tried to take a shortcut, fell into the ravine, broke his phone in the fall, thought he was dead. A pause. Said something kept him warm through the night. Something that didn't leave even when it should have. I looked through the window into Luna's room. She was still sleeping, sides rising and falling in steady rhythm. Do you want him to meet her? Eventually, when he can walk again. Another pause. Hayes, you know this is going to get out, right? Local news at minimum, maybe bigger. I know.
People are going to want to see her, call her a hero. She is a hero. She's also wild and exhausted and hurt. She doesn't owe anyone her story. No, I agreed. She doesn't. We kept the clinic closed for 3 days. Casey fielded calls while I stayed with Luna, monitoring her recovery, watching her strength return in small increments. She ate, she drank, she let me change her bandages without complaint. But she never stopped watching the windows. On the 4th morning, I found her enclosure door open. Not broken, not forced, just open, the way it was 3 years ago. Her blankets were disturbed where she'd been sleeping, the water bowl was empty, and in the fresh snow outside, a single line of tracks led from the back door to the tree line. I followed them as far as I could. They disappeared into the forest, heading northeast, back toward territory only she understood. Casey found me standing at the tree line an hour later. She left? It wasn't really a question. Yeah. Did you want her to stay? I thought about that. About 3 years ago when she'd made this same choice, and the part of me that wanted to keep her safe, and the part that understood safety wasn't what she needed. I want her to have what she wants, finally, whatever that is. We walked back to the clinic together. The sun was out for the first time in a week, turning the snow-covered parking lot into something almost beautiful. The local paper ran the story. Then the regional news picked it up. Then someone's video from the helicopter went viral, and suddenly everyone wanted to know about the Bobcat who saved a hiker's life. They asked for photos, interviews, a chance to see her. I told them all the same thing. She's not here. She made her choice. Some people understood. Others didn't. But every evening, just after sunset, I left fresh food by the tree line, and 3 times a week it was gone by morning. I never saw her take it, never caught her watching from the shadows, but I knew. The way you know when something wild chooses to trust you, not because it needs you, but because somewhere between human and animal, obligation and choice, captivity and freedom, a promise was made, and kept. 6 months later, I found a torn piece of fabric on my doorstep, neon yellow, a runner's safety vest, and beside it, in the dirt, a single paw print. I called search and rescue. They found her, a jogger with a sprained ankle, 2 miles into the forest, sitting beside a small bobcat who refused to leave until help arrived. When they got there, Luna was gone, but the jogger was alive. I keep the fabric in my desk drawer now, along with the blue Gore-Tex from that first night. Casey thinks I'm sentimental. She's probably right. But sometimes, when the clinic is quiet and the evening light hits just right, I look at those scraps and wonder how many others there have been. How many times Luna has found someone lost, stayed with them through the dark, then slipped away before gratitude could turn into expectation. How many heroes walk away before we learn their names, and how many more we've already overlooked simply because they never asked to be seen. So, Luna's out there somewhere, saving lives we'll never hear about. And you know what? This channel's kind of like that, trying to tell stories that matter, reaching people we haven't met yet. But here's the thing, we can't do it alone. If this story made you feel something, anything, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that courage doesn't always roar. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's the wildest act of loyalty you've ever witnessed? We're climbing toward 1,000 subscribers, one story at a time, and unlike Luna, we're actually asking for help. Don't make this awkward. Let's get there together.